Welcome to Disruptor in Chief, a show about the ongoing revolution in higher education. Let's hear from the main man leading the charge at Maryville University. Here's your host, Dr. Mark Lombardi.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Lombardi, and welcome to another episode of Disruptor in Chief, where here at Maryville University, we talk about our amazing array of innovative things that are happening in higher education, whether we're involved in them or others are involved in them. And today, we've got a really special treat. We've got Dan Clerke with us today. He's the Director of Esports here at Maryville University, and I've gotten to know Dan over many years. Great story and great set of achievements in the arena of esports, and I think a lot of you are going to find it really fascinating. So welcome, Dan. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get started at the beginning. Tell everybody how you came to Maryville University as a student, and then how the whole esports revolution here at Maryville got started, because you're the one who started it.
So I was originally in engineering school at Rolla. I did a lot of engineering competitions in high school and thought I'd love it for the rest of my life, and found out pretty quickly when I had a full semester of math-related courses that wasn't the case.
That happens to a lot of people.
And it just so happened that the only other thing that I was really good at was video games. So I decided with my dorm mate, hey, we were watching esports. We were like seeing how unprofessional it was at the time and how new it was. Like, we could do what they're doing. We could build a team. Why don't we try? And within a year and a half, our team had made the LCS, which was like the Apex League. At that point, I was a team owner with absolutely zero business acumen, just a massive ego. And because I thought I was on top of the world, I thought I just made the NFL or something, or the Premier League of Soccer at 21. And I was offered a bunch of money for my team. So at that point, I was like, I need to enroll in a school to learn more about business. And that's how I came across Maryville. It was local. I could go from my job at Deerbergs to here pretty easily. It was very convenient for me. My parents didn't believe me when I told them that I had been offered a bunch of money for my team. So the next closest person I could go to get advice was my counselor, John Lewington. And within within 3 days, I was in your office, and we were talking about how this is pretty cool. How can we get this on campus? And
I remember that day.
I'll be honest, at the beginning, it was so out there and so wild that we would be giving scholarships or supporting this in a competitive capacity at a university that even I didn't know if I wanted to do it. But quickly after I had a few months in the professional scene and I had seen the state of the industry, I saw pretty quickly how much it was needed for there to be some form of fallback or way for students to transition into education with this, and how even when I was at Rolla, all the gamers on campus, they would just do it out of their dorms. There was nothing on campus to cater to them. There was no way to activate them on campus, and that was when I decided, hey, let's try it. It was crazy at the time. A lot of the endemics thought it was crazy, but now there's over 550 supported programs, so sounds like we put our chips in the right pot.
Oh, we certainly did. I remember that first meeting. You came in, John Lewington, and you started talking about gaming, and I understood only every third or fourth word because I knew nothing about esports. But I remember you saying to me, Dr. Lombardi, if you let me start a team, we'll go undefeated and we'll win the collegiate national championship in League of Legends, right? And I remember saying, well, you're the first person who's ever come into my office and said anything like that. So why not? Let's take a shot.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. We were undefeated and
I have
won.
A confession to make. I think a lot of that at the time was because we were the only one at the time. But yeah, I'm still very confident in our ability to compete, and as we've seen over the years. And yeah, it's been a wild ride since then.
So you graduated in what year?
2018. It took a little longer than my mother would have liked.
Yeah. Well, that's true for probably all of us. Yeah. And then obviously we hired you. You started off, you came right in as director of esports. Now give us a sense of the landscape of esports here at Maryville first, right now. How many teams, where we recruit student athletes from and gamers from, and all of that landscape that you've built.
Sure. So we're pretty unique in the way that we model our program compared to a lot of the other institutions. A lot of the other institutions, they see it solely as a way to increase enrollment. Some schools will even be like, hey, I'll give you a scholarship if you can bring 3 of your friends to the school. And those are schools that we compete directly with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really kind of the Wild West. There's really no uniform model like athletics yet for this. Some of it lives in student life, some of it lives in athletics, some of it's its own department, some places. So at Maryville, we have a very simple goal, and it's to change the perception of the professional ecosystem around collegiate in terms of like how competitive it can be. There's this myth in professional esports that you need to train for your entire day to play at that level or to get to that level. And so what that results in is a lot of people dropping out of high school to pursue this.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that that's a healthy thing. And I think that idea is a myth to begin with. So we serve 3 types of students at Maryville. In our program, we serve the players that are on their way to pro, that are pragmatic about their chances. We serve the players that are on their way to pro whose parents don't support their pursuits. It's pretty coin flip we've seen over the last 10 years when you're able to tell your parents, hey, I have a scholarship for this. The parent within a couple months is like their biggest supporter pretty quickly. So,
Sure.
And then the third player is there's no NCAA. A lot of the players flare out by like 2021.
Thankfully, there's no NCAA.
Yeah. So the players that are done with pro that want to use their skills to get a degree, and we usually round out our rosters with players like that, and they tend to be like the leaders within our team.
I know when we won the first or second national championship, I got a call from the NCAA, some of the leadership there, because they wanted to know more about esports. They wanted to see if the NCAA should get involved in it. And I remember not just myself, but I'm sure others, I advised them, stay away from it, don't get involved, because so many of the players that we recruit have already competed professionally, and they've monetized their abilities in competition on, platforms like Twitch and others, right?
Yeah, and so our players on campus, they win prize money here while they're going to school here. It's very messy and very complicated. Every time I call our athletic director, I think that I'm presenting him with some new problem that he's never heard of. So I'm a bit of a thorn in his side, but we have some pretty stimulating conversations, I would say.
Well, and I would imagine that's true at most universities because, as you mentioned, esports operates outside of the normal athletic framework, the NCAA and compliance and all the rest of it. And so athletic directors, and it's not a criticism, don't know how to understand it or quite deal with it. I mean, I've only learned about it through working with you over time. I mean, initially, what I knew about it, was infinitesimal compared to today.
Well, I would say also that like one of the advantages that we have is that we have a president that's willing to listen, and we have an athletic director that's willing to listen, because I talk to many esports directors around the country, and they can't even get a word in edgewise with their superiors. So if they even wanted to try to explain something or get them to understand it, they couldn't even get air to have that conversation. Like if I talk to you about like Overwatch, League of Legends, Valorant, and Rocket League, that those are games, what kind of games they are. Like the vast majority of administrators out there aren't even to that point yet. And so I would say it's also like just the culture that we have here on campus. I think that also lends to why we're able to be so successful.
Well, and let's give a message out to other universities and other presidents. I can do that as a president of a university. Don't think of this. You can think of this as gaming. You can think of it as athletics. You can think of it as education, because as you point out, it's all those things. It's also fantastic marketing, because Maryville University has been all over the Twitch platform, which is, by the way, one of the top 1 or 2 or 3 most watched platforms on earth for young people and so forth. And so from a marketing perspective, esports has been a huge boon for Maryville University, aside from our victories and our performance and our graduation rates and all the rest.
Yeah, we've had articles on ESPN. We've had spots on MSNBC. Like, it's actually pretty crazy. We've traveled to China for events and been all over Chinese media. I remember being on a panel in China where at the end of it, when they were closing it, I don't speak Mandarin, so I had a translator. and the host said, they know they can't beat us. They know they can't win here. And I'm just like smiling at the camera thinking that he's like closing out the panel, and the translator afterwards was like, no, he was being mean. And I was like, oh, okay. I just looked really stupid on Chinese media. That's cool. But yeah,
Well,
I mean, those are opportunities that I think.
if the Chinese media is attacking you, it means you're doing something right, I guess. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So give everybody a sense of, for example, our record, how many victories, how many tournament wins, national championships. I've learned over time in following all this, like so many schools organize their entire team around beating us.
Yeah.
Because we're sort of seen as the big bully on the block in a good way.
So I don't have like an exact record. We haven't done the tally in the last year or so, but we definitely have above a 90% win rate across all games in the last 10 years, which is obviously very impressive, but it's more impressive when you see like how it's been sustained. There have been a lot of programs that have come and gone. Like our early main rivals and opponents are no longer a program. Some of the ones that we competed with in the first 3 years, they don't have teams that are nearly as strong. They don't have programs that are nearly as robust. So a lot of people have come and gone to try to compete with us. And I would say that like we're the only program that's really stood the test of time at that level currently. A lot of that can stem from the director moving on to a Division I school. It can stem from...
Well, you've had a few offers, I know.
yeah, definitely. And I continue to get them, and that's kind of where this is headed. Like Michigan State is in now, Ole Miss is in supporting with full rides. It's just what's going to happen. So that's going to be kind of the next challenge for us, is how we can survive through that next phase. But I'm very confident with like what we've built that we'll easily be able to transition into that era.
and like for those of people out listening that might not know, maybe have never played these games before, like any other sport, the gamers who are really serious about it want to compete against the best competition. They want to play in front of, whether it's in reality or virtually, in front of big crowds and a lot of people. And so, that's what Maryville University affords them. They know that they're going to be probably competing for the national championship every year.
Yeah, and I've heard many directors, every time like there's a school that ends up beating us, that ever since they've started their program, like this has been like the milestone that they've been chasing, is like winning a game against Maryville. And I don't think that's going to change. I think that I'm pretty happy if we're in that spot where like the entire campus is celebrating when they take a game off us. But like the reality is a lot of teams don't have fun playing us. We have to figure out divisions for this at some point, because I don't know if you've probably seen the famous college football photo where it's like Cumberland versus whoever, and Cumberland loses like 128-0, and like half the team's injured.
Right.
That's kind of where college esports is at. So like until we get the playoffs, the majority of our matches are absolute blowouts. And
well, talk about, because I'm involved with, you got me involved with this, the organization of presidents and others that is formed to do that, to try to get at some rules of the road, so to speak. Why don't you talk about that organization?
Yeah, so before I get into that, I'll just talk about like the current environment. So what the current environment is I feel like the majority of people out there are going to be gravitated to standards that fit what they're able to do within their program. So whatever is advantageous to the individual at the university that's running the program, those are the rules they're going to support, which is very unhealthy, because if a school does not give housing to their director for their students, for example, they're obviously going to prefer tournaments that allow online students, because that's going to be their only way that they can get the roster to compete with us. And so if you take that multiple degrees, we've gotten to the point where there are programs that support ludicrous things. Like we played a team this year that added a player a week before the playoffs in the middle of the semester, and we had no idea he was on the team. There's no like form of transfer portal, so I spend my entire winter break making sure our players aren't being poached, making sure that I know exactly what's going on with my team, because I could wake up December 27th and a player is at another school on our team, and I'm left scrambling right before the semester to handle this. And so
that's why the total student experience, educational experience, all those things are so important.
Yeah.
To kids, so that students are invested not just in the game but in the institution and in their education.
And I mean, I ran a pro team for 10 years, and I managed teams online that whole time, and like it's a very easy job. You just check Discord and you message people, make sure they're doing okay. Like if you're managing a fully online team, like what are you managing? You're not managing anything. You
Right.
just have to like the only way that like you can impact these students is if like you're looking them in the eyes and having conversations with them every day and seeing their ebbs and flows through life. Like that's like the most important part is having the touch point. But yeah, no, the organization voice, the purpose of that organization is like there's a lot of noise in the director sphere. Everybody has very skewed opinions that are meant to benefit themselves. It's meant to cut through all that, to get directly to as many university presidents that want to talk about this and platform this and get to the root of like what the presidents see are the issues for the future of this. And then there's a group of very passionate and hardworking people within that org that take that information, they turn around research or official university level media that we can then spread out to all the programs across the country and be like,
yeah, and I know from my involvement, limited involvement, that there's a lot of stereotyping about gamers and gaming, stereotypes about the games themselves, about the gamers, about the questions about is it a sport or not, quote unquote. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation out there. I've seen that in a variety of different conversations.
And to put it blunt, like, and a lot of my colleagues might get mad at me, I don't see it as a sport. Mm-hmm. I grew up playing hockey. I don't see it the same way. I think it's a competition. I just see it as digital competition. If you're going to call it anything, call it digital sport. I mean,
there's certainly a skill set that has to be developed in order to compete at various levels.
Oh, 100%. There was a recent study done on chess players, grandmaster chess players, where in any one day of tournament, they can burn up to 6,000 calories.
Wow.
Playing chess, because I would imagine there are similar statistics for esports. It's a lot of very quick math, multiple things happening at once, and you have to have extremely high APM, which means actions per minute, which could come down to like a button click or anything in the game.
And you told me one time that really your optimum age range is, from preteen to about 25, and then you start going downhill from that, which means I'm way over the hill.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm over the hill. I'll get on the games. I can't play Call of Duty anymore because I lose to a 15-year-old, and I remember how good I was at this when I was 18, and I'm just like, my ego can't handle this. I have to like find different games to play where I'm starting from scratch, knowing that like I'm bad at this and like there's things for me to learn.
Maybe we should start a seniors league,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
For everybody over the age of 30.
In hockey, they have beer leagues. We need to make a beer league for esports.
It would probably be very popular.
Yeah.
Twitch is the main platform that delivers the digital content around gaming, as you know very well. And a lot of people don't know anything about Twitch. When I talk to people about Twitch, they tell me about that and whatever. There's some data or statistics out there that's just crazy. I think at one point, maybe it's changed now, it was the second largest streamer of content on Earth. I think the only entity that was larger at the time was Netflix. I'm sure Amazon Prime and others have gone past that. But there are hundreds of millions of people on Twitch who are watching and participating and engaged in gaming. Talk a little bit about that platform.
Yeah, so I mean, esports is just a really small subset of that overall platform. It is mostly for like individual creators. It's so that creators can connect with their audience in a live way. Direct touch points, all that stuff. And more recently, since the last time we talked about Twitch, there have been a lot of competitors that have actually entered this space, challenging them for the king of streaming. So YouTube is now a direct competitor of Twitch. Kick recently was formed, and they're a direct competitor of Twitch. I don't see this really going away. I see traditional sports learning from what Twitch has created and what live streaming has become and adopting that for how their consumers consume the league.
So give people an idea. I know, for example, one example that you've told me about, like our players who had developed a following. There are plenty of young people out there that follow our players and want to know how they're doing. And they'll sort of say, well, at 10 o'clock tonight, I'm going to practice League of Legends for an hour. Why don't you tune in and watch me, and I'll interact with you. And there's a lot of really that kind of interaction, right?
Yeah, we actually have one of the most famous Overwatch players of all time currently on our team. His name's Dante, and he streams to hundreds of people every single night in our lab. People that want to tune in, just like he's known for his Doomfist, which is a character in Overwatch. So I imagine his chat is full of Doomfist players that want to like learn all the little intricacies and just see how he plays the character and see how he approaches the game and talks about the game. But it's also just they're gravitated to his personality. Not every player in the league that plays that character is popular.
So the players take on a persona.
Yeah.
As you're referencing, you know, they have their own name. They invent a name or they create a name, and they take on that persona, right?
Yeah, I'm Clerke. It's actually kind of crazy because I've almost identified with Clerke more than my actual name, Dan. And it's kind of weird when people call me Dan, especially from the gaming community. But yeah, no, definitely, it is a persona thing. What was I going to say before? I forgot what I was going to say before, but yeah, streaming is a huge part of this.
So from the time we recruit a player and they come in and their scholarship, obviously, so they are the player, by the way, Maryville's got a ton of what I would call club players and people who are gaming or whatever, but of the ones that are competing at the national level in tournaments and matches and so forth, you know, give a sense of like the average day / week of a player. How much practice time? What obviously they're going to class, whatever. Because people have a stereotype that, you know, this is about a 6-pack of Mountain Dew, a bag of Doritos, and a bathrobe is kind of the uniform.
Yeah.
Because that's the way some people think of this. But give them a sense of what's that's like.
So this is one of the areas of the space that I think could use the most improvement. We basically have to compete. We basically have to practice to what will allow us to compete at the level of our highest level of competition, which as a school, the highest level of competition we compete at is semi-pro or tier 2 esports. So it'd be like the AHL equivalent in hockey or AAA baseball.
Right.
And so to compete at that level, which starts usually in January and ends in June for us, we're practicing anywhere from 2 to 9 p.m. every day, and that's deliberate practice where we're practicing against opponents and we're reviewing games between every game. On the average day, our players wake up, they go to class. We have a hybrid model here at Maryville, so some students might have 2 classes online, 3 in person. They might have 4 in person, 1 online.
Sure.
And so we kind of deliberately make sure that our students' schedules are lined up so that they finish by 1 or 2 p.m. every day. At that point, the players can choose to do homework or individual practice before team practice or go to the gym. I'm proud that nowadays the majority of our players hit the gym when they get out of class. If you lined our players up, I don't think that you'd be able to point out that they're gamers, which is something that I think is awesome. We actually have a sponsor right now. They're called First Form. They're a athletic supplement company, and we send them out to do workouts in their facility every now and then.
So this is important, I think, for the listeners because there's a stereotype out there about gamers, but wellness, physical and emotional, all of that stuff is really important for gamers to be able to compete at a high level, right?
It's extremely important because if you're eating junk food all day and you're staying up till 5 in the morning, your mind will not be as sharp the next day. It's like you'd think that it's a common sense thing, but I don't think a lot of gamers understand this. And a lot of parents come to me, especially in the local area, and they'll be like, "Hey, my kid plays this game all the time, every day. He says he's really good at it and can get a scholarship one day. Should I let him just go free and do whatever he wants and play as much as he says he needs to play?" I'm like, no, definitely not. Make sure that he's going to bed at the right time. Make sure that he's eating properly. Make sure that his practice is deliberate. A lot of times when parents tell me that their players that their kids practice esports constantly, what it really means is like they're in the gym playing horse. They're not doing it in a way where they're going to improve at it. And so that's really the core of the day at Maryville here is it's completely catered and centered to how can I improve at the game today.
So I think people would be surprised or at least pleasantly surprised to find out there's a lot of structure to it. It's not simply, hey, log on and play, that there has to be a structure and a plan.
Yes.
And a sort of coaching strategy, if you will, and in order to get the most and the best effort and the best results out of each player.
100%. And I would say that like even if like the professional ecosystem came down and watched today at Maryville, they'd be shocked at the amount of effort that goes into how the sausage is made, how we're able to play at this level while attending full-time classes. Mm-hmm. We meet one-on-one with the players individually weekly. We do grade checks daily with the players. We have rules where if you have a C or below, you're not allowed to compete or practice, but you have to attend practice. And that's all deliberate, because if a player's mental falls out of whack or a class falls out of whack, it snowballs very quickly in this, because we practice so much during the day that if you have to make something up or you have to spend extra time on class because you've missed something, you're now using that time that you needed to spend on the game, and that could be the difference between us winning or losing on Saturday.
For sure, and I can speak from where I sit that in all the years we've had esports, and under your direction, obviously, the number of issues we've had, whether it's grades or behavioral from the players, has been very, very small. It hasn't been a large number at all. In fact, probably count them on one hand.
For all the times that I call RAD and I'm like talking to him about stuff, I remember there was one time I was like, "Man, we must be a really big pain in your side, huh, Lonnie?" And he's like, "Actually, no, not really. Your guys are pretty tame."
Well, that's, for athletic directors, that's high praise for sure. Let's talk a little bit about, I know, and it's always been your dream, and we've been able to support it, this idea of building an esports ecosystem, right?
Yes.
Both at the youth level and within the community and statewide and beyond. Talk a little bit about what we've done and what you want to do in the future to build out that ecosystem.
So up until this point, the professional ecosystem has catered to like the 1%. It's really not built on any form of base. It caters to the players that qualify for playing at Madison Square Garden and the people that want to go watch them. I think for this to be an economically sustainable pursuit in the future in industry, we have to activate parents, and it has to become normalized for parents to spend money on this, because it's not currently. Like if I had a son or a daughter right now, there's nothing that I can take them out to in their local environment to put them in to play esports. When I grew up, my mom put me in hockey. She took me to hockey practice every week. I was around kids that also were playing hockey that I could relate to, and she was around parents that also could relate to the activity as well.
You drive by the Chesterfield Hockey Arena on a Saturday morning, and it's the parking lot's filled.
Yes.
There's kids in there of all ages and parents, and so an ecosystem similar to that, right?
That exists zero in esports. So the biggest key for me moving forward is I want to normalize that. And I understand that that's going to be a huge undertaking to do that nationally, but I think that we can control that locally. And that's the first step, is creating a blueprint here that can then be replicated across the country. While esports has grown a lot, you have to remember that we're still in the very early days of baseball with this. And that's been a tough thing for me to swallow, because I've been thinking I'm 30 right now, and I might not even live to get to see what esports ends up being in its final form at the end of the day. We could have VR headsets on. Ditch the mouse and keyboard, and the VR headset's able to calculate my muscle mass and physical ability, and we're playing basketball on the moon or something. Who knows what esports looks like in its final form?
You're going to live to see it. I'm the one who's not going to live to see it. Well, let's talk a little bit too about the venues, because there's online competition, there's in-person competition. There are, for some of our listeners, there are competitions that are held in sports arenas like the Enterprise Center or what have you, where thousands of people come and watch. So what for our teams, what has been the sort of the range of competition that you've seen? I mean, in terms of different venues.
So we've done everything from play a national championship out of our computer lab and use silly string when we win to celebrate, all the way to playing on a massive stage on a beach in Sanya, China. So to millions of people watching. Mm-hmm. So there really is a massive range. I think that at its best, esports is in person. I think you don't really learn anything when it's online. There's an entire other mental component to it when you're looking your opponent in the face in esports, because it's a very confidence-driven activity. You have to be wholly confident in your ability to make a play in a split second, or you will fail at it. And when you're getting an upper hand on an opponent and you're able to look them in the eyes after, it snowballs very quickly. So
yeah, I know from watching our team compete that there'll be a moment where you'll text me and say, "Uh-oh," and then there'll be a switch and we'll overcome that or what have you and win, and it happens in like you say, in a millisecond.
Yeah.
let's talk a little, and in that context, and for those people who may not be aware of, a few years ago, the St. Louis Sports Commission sponsored an esports, I think a North American National Championship.
That was the LCS Spring Finals.
Okay, thank you.
Which is the Apex League in North America currently.
Exactly, and it was held at Javits Arena on the campus of SLU, and with no marketing whatsoever, just putting on social media, it sold out in a matter of like 20, 30 minutes, right? It was just, and we went to that, and it was an amazing venue. I mean, the energy, the crowd, it was incredible.
People tell me to this day that was one of the best finals in the history of League of Legends. It was a reverse sweep as well. Like, a team went up 2 games, and the other team came back and won 3-2. Also, I've heard, like, after the fact, like, the audience there sold multiples more food and drink than the SLU basketball team does when it's packed in there. So I thought that was an interesting statistic. So there is like a live market for this. It's just a matter of like figuring out what the appropriate size is, what the appropriate amount of times per year is. That's a code that has yet to be cracked.
So towards that end, I know that we here at Maryville have been working on the design and development of a multi-purpose, but principally an esports arena. And why don't you tell people about what that would be like? I know this is a dream of yours, and I can't go into all the details, but we are definitely on the fast track to getting something like that off the ground. But talked about what that would look like for Maryville University and for this entire ecosystem.
So the first period of Maryville Esports, the purpose was to establish ourselves as a dominant national brand. This second phase, once we complete the arena, is going to be taking that brand and turning it towards our local community and lifting our local community up. I think that universities, the fastest way to grow this as an industry is universities becoming nuclei to their local communities. So as soon as that opens, the entire purpose of it is going to be increasing the competitive level of our local area, getting our students in a room with kids in our local area to make them better at the game. We're going to offer high school competition on weekends. We're going to offer state championships. We're going to offer collegiate invitationals. We're going to offer summer camps. We're going to offer nightly skill development. We're going to offer parent education. We're going to offer collegiate summits where we're inviting directors out to talk about this. So there's all kinds of things that we're going to be able to do with that, and I'm super excited about it, but it's all going to be centered around how do we get this in the hands of more people? I think the next step of this is how do I make it so that there's an ecosystem where any kid that wants to get involved in this, they're able to do it in a way that's live and impactful and gives them the same experience that they would get being in a sport.
And I think also, although you're much obviously more engaged in this than I am, but I've been reading a lot lately about the types of skills and abilities that young people develop in gaming and how those can be translated into other professions and other experiences when obviously they no longer are able to compete at that level. They can still play it for fun, just like, I golf or shoot hoops for fun. But talk about that in terms of what can be learned and developed for other professions and jobs and careers and things down the line.
There's a massive spectrum. I mean, I think at its core, you're going to be learning the same things that you learn being in any sport. I think, though, in esports, there's a higher level of leadership and ownership simply because the teams are smaller. If I'm on a hockey team, I can kind of blend into the background with 20 guys on the team. But if I'm on an esports team, like a League of Legends team, there's 5 guys on my team. So I'm 20% of the team. That's a big percentage. So
right.
The way that I act and conduct myself is going to have a massive impact on the team.
And I know you feel strongly about, and we're working on developing, integrating women into esports. And why don't you talk about traditionally, not as many women have been involved in gaming and esports as men, but particularly at the younger age. But how we're going to work into women into this emerging, exploding area.
A few years ago, we actually sent a woman to the professional league. I mean, regrettably, we haven't had a large percentage of women within our program, but that's simply because we design our teams around we are going to win. And so a lot of times that's us just taking the username that gives us the highest chance of winning a tournament. And that just so happens like the majority of times that's going to be a male player. I mean, the last 10 years or so, the gender gap between men and women in gaming has reduced significantly. And I think
there's still a gap there.
Yeah, I think the gap is not a function of men have a higher physical ability in this than women by any means. I think it's because there's a lot of social barriers in gaming and a lot of stigmas, and I think women get treated very poorly in video games, and that comes down to like education and making an impact over time.
So there is an element where in the gaming industry, the design of these games needs to and not all of them fit this, but some games need to really change the stereotyping within the game design, right, to better reflect the way society is and should be.
I think it's less that. I think it's more that they need to do a better job of policing their communities and defining what's right and wrong and holding their communities just to a higher standard. I mean, the silver lining of that is we do a lot of high school visits, and we visit a lot of programs in our area, and there's a ton of young women that are getting involved in this nowadays, and it's just increasing year over year. You just have to build a welcoming and supportive environment. It can't be a hostile environment or it won't work, and that's really what I think is holding that back currently. Mm-hmm. And it's something that like we are going to be very focused on moving forward when we have more resources to do so.
Yeah. No, we will. Maryville wants to be a part of moving in that positive direction that you're talking about and doing it decisively.
Yeah.
What's next for Clerke in esports? What other than the arena and building this ecosystem? I know you're always aware of the emergence of new and different games in the industry and what's becoming the most popular games. What's next?
So currently we serve Overwatch, League of Legends, Valorant, and Rocket League. I don't think that we're going to grow past that for quite some time. I think that we're going to be masters of a few things as opposed to being good at a lot of things. And I'm okay with that. I like that better than having 10 teams. I think that if we had 10 teams, I wouldn't be able to have touch point with everybody on a daily basis like I currently have, and that's part of why I think we're so good. But I think long term, I want to get back into pro. I want to do both this and pro simultaneously. I think that building a comprehensive pipeline in St. Louis and making St. Louis my actual paramount dream is to make Missouri to esports what Minnesota and Michigan are to hockey.
And I share that view.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. Talk a little bit about, several of our players have gotten pro contracts while they're here and making significant salaries. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we've sent 12 players to pro. I think in the last 5 years, it took us 3 years to get people to even take our players seriously because it was such a crazy thing to have a collegiate program early on. But every year we're sending more and more players per year to pro. It's becoming more normalized. In fact, pro coaches will call me up and be like, hey, do you have any diamonds in the rough? I don't have as much budget as my opponents. Do you have someone that I could sign? And a lot of times the answer is yes. But our players have gone on to sign contracts that are several $100,000
a year
straight out of contract.
Yeah, when I tell
out of college.
When I tell parents that their attitude about gaming changes dramatically when their son can make that kind of money. Is it a challenge? Is it to keep the best players interested in the collegiate and educational experience when people are dangling that kind of money out there?
Yes, but to a certain extent, like, if the student has an opportunity to do that, you've got to let them go do it for themselves. Like one of our players, I'm not going to get into specifics of who they are, but they had an opportunity to go pro, and I was like, this pro team is not built for you to succeed on it. You will fail on this pro team, but the money's really good, and you can listen to me. But I think that, or you can not listen to me, but I think that if you just wait it out for another year, you'll have a better offer with a better team where you can succeed longer. And the player went and took it, and they were back here within a year. But, like, when you're in that situation, it's like I have an opportunity to move to LA and make several $100,000 a year. You kind of have to let them learn for themselves.
And as you talked about, a small window, right? Like in other sports, it's not as if they're going to be making that kind of money in gaming for the next 40 years. They really have a 3, 5, 6 year window or so at that level, right?
My hope is that with time, it is proven that is not because of some decrease in twitch reflex or some biological reason why it's that small. I think that long term, we're going to come to find that the reason why the careers are short is because there are no standards for practice. And so when you turn 24, 25, your priorities tend to start to shift in life. Players get a girlfriend. They start to value going outside more, doing normalized things, having a life. And so as soon as you start to prioritize those things, there's some 16-year-old that's going to overtake your position. So I think once this becomes a more sustainable career path, where there's a players union that supports player health and mental health and well-being and all that stuff, and there are rules designed around this, I think that the average age of pro players will start to get larger. But I think the oldest right now that's active is like early 30s. But there's like, I could count those on one hand.
Yeah. Speaking of which, the college student who came into my office and sold me on esports, you recently got married.
Yes.
And what you were talking about, the whole expansion of all kinds of responsibilities in life, right? And, and so forth. So and just a few months, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's been really good.
And you had to talk about your gaming before.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. We've had a couple conversations in the last month or so where I've been, well, you signed up for this. I got to go up to the lab at 11 p.m.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, it's no different from like a college football coach or a high school football coach. Like, there's an understanding that when you're a coach or you're a director, you're going to be very involved with your work. You're going to be very involved with the kids. And so she understands that, and she's my biggest supporter, and I wouldn't have it any other way. My dad, whenever he calls me, he has a knack for, if I'm very stressed about something at work, he immediately wants me to relive it and talk about it again on the phone when he gets off work. So I tend to go to her for things first now, just because she understands like where my stress levels are at. She reads me like a book, and she's amazing.
That's great. That's wonderful. And just as a personal aside, we've won how many national championships now?
9.
And, of course, like in a sport, we get rings for the players. And so now it's gotten to the point where we win a national championship, Dan will text me a picture of a ring, which I know that means we've got another ring coming.
How many should we order, Dr. Lombardi?
There you go.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want our listeners to know about the esports, particularly looking to the future, that you think it's important for them to understand?
I think that this is going to be a widely viewed podcast because nobody's ever seen a esports director speak directly with the president of the institution in a way that people can view. So I think it would be more important to turn that question around to you and ask you what it is that you see Maryville getting out of esports, just in general, and what the motivation as a president is for getting into esports. Because I think that that's the number one question for college administrators everywhere and college directors. And I don't want to put a lot of pressure on you, but I think the way that you answer this question, a lot of college directors will go to their administration.
Well, I appreciate that. And let me just say this, that for someone who was not a gamer, never played video games in my life other than Madden years ago, and who didn't understand any of this, I think the most important thing for a president or any administrator who's approached is really to understand two things. One, there are millions and millions and millions of people all over the world who are gamers. What does that mean? It means that there is something important and positive and valuable about it. Like any other activity, any activity can be abused or done too much or whatever, and too much football, too much this, too much this. But it is a very popular and a very widespread activity. So the question becomes, how do you harness it, and how do you create an ecosystem, as you've done, and create an environment where young people can do something they love, be passionate about it, committed to it, and also learn and get education and learn about all the other things that you've talked about, wellness and taking care of themselves and discipline and the discipline of practice. And all of those things are valuable for people to learn. So if you, as a president, I look at it as an educational and a marketing and really a way for us to model the kind of behavior we want all of our students to have, not just gamers, not just student athletes, but all of our students. So as a president, I would advise presidents, and I have, to look at it that way. Don't look at it in terms of people are playing games. It's people are engaging in an activity where they can learn a whole host of life lessons and grow and mature through it. Don't try to understand all of it. I can tell you that, because I'll be watching us competing online in a championship, and I'll text Dan and say, "Was that good or bad?"
Yeah.
and he'll say, "That's good," or "That's bad," or "We're in trouble," or "We're doing great." So I can't say that I can follow every aspect of the game all the time, but it's the faith in the values behind the activity, I think, that is the most important thing for presidents to understand, and I think to support. And there are a lot of people out there that are willing to support and get behind what you've done here at Maryville, what we've done with esports, and what we're going to do with the arena and all the other ecosystem dimensions we're going to build.
So I'll take it one step further then. A lot of universities see this purely as an enrollment bump. We do not see it that way. So from the president's words, how do you derive value out of the esports program if it's not just to get an enrollment bump?
Well,
because Maryville has no shortage of needs for enrollment.
And we have seen enrollment go up because of more students there are students that want to compete, but there are also students that just want to be around our game, just like any other sport, right? When you're successful in soccer, you can attract students who want to be part of or around. So, but that's not why we did it. We did it because we felt that it is an emerging activity, industry, and educational experience. And the business around esports is really, first of all, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, which means that there are literally all kinds of careers around esports: broadcasting, coaching, all the training, all the things that you alluded to in our conversation. So it's really opening universities have to open themselves up to the idea this is a reality, and it exists, and it's vibrant, and it's growing all the time. And as a result, why not provide a venue where young people can enjoy it, regardless of whatever the enrollment changes are or the enrollment impact is. That shouldn't be the number one reason to do it.
Well, I appreciate that, because if you ask me, like, if there's anything that I want to say, the majority of people watching this are going to be esports people, and if you're an esports person, you know that I don't shut up. So they already know what I'm going to say. so it's nice to hear from you, for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's been great to share this time with Dan. When we get together and talk, we cover a whole bunch of ground, and time flies. But it has been, and I don't get to say this often, it's been an honor and a pleasure to be on this wild ride with Dan and esports the last several years, and it's been an education for me. I've learned about a whole industry and business and area and sports and things that I didn't know anything about. So it's been a great learning experience, and I appreciate that very much. So on behalf of Dan, we hope you enjoy this episode of Disruptor in Chief, and when that arena starts being built, and we'll bring Dan back, and we'll have a conversation about all that good stuff. So thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for Disruptor in Chief. Please share this episode with people in your network who might benefit from it. We'll see you next time.